Hey, good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Well, we got a couple minutes. Any questions, concerns? I'll kind of quiz two. There have been a few examples of the quiz questions that were in an incorrect order. So I'm going to look at that further. What I may end up doing for quiz two is just to make it easier is to give everybody full credit for the second quiz. Then have you go through and go and do it again. So everybody has to complete quiz two by Sunday midnight. And if you've taken the quiz, I'll give you credit. If you don't take the quiz, I won't be giving you credit for it because you didn't take it. But I'll give you full credit for the quiz two after Sunday's cutoff. Okay. Any other questions, concerns? No?
Good morning.
Yes, Lorna? No? Okay. All right. Well, why don't we start with a little review and then we'll jump into chapter 3, which is visualizing yourself in the work environment. Now, you can interpret that a number of different ways, but as we get into the chapter, what it's really saying is, as opposed to approaching jobs as in the value of what they pay per hour, for example, or some kind of narrow or limited view, you really want to take a much more deeper process of evaluating potential employers based on other similarities in thinking, culture. We'll get into some of this. So the visualizing part is really knowing yourself well, which is what we covered in chapter 1, well enough to know that you can identify companies who represent the values that you have. Again, many times we'll take a job and really don't understand the nature of the company or its culture until we're in it for some length of time. And then by that time, it's too late. I mean, we're in the job. We've got to kind of accept the fact that, we've got to operate that way. So let's take a look and just before we jump into this chapter about visualizing, let's go through a few slides in a review here. So everybody see that? All right. Give me a thumbs up or just so I can make sure you can see it.
Yeah, we can see.
Okay, Longer. Thank you. All right. So this is something we did and I was describing in the first week. In other words, it's answering the question, okay, what is this process that I'm starting into where I'm looking for work or an opportunity or a job? What's going on the other side of the table? What's the employer, what's their view of this process? I know I'm supposed to put a resume and a cover letter together, maybe gather references, and then I submit that and wait for contact from the employer. But what's the employer doing? So the way to think of this is this pie chart. If you start at the top and move left to right, so the first step is then the percentages are relating to the weight of the information in deciding whether to hire you or not. So that first pie slice of 10%, which is the first step, which is you applying maybe in an online environment, uploading a resume, providing a cover letter, that weighs 10%. That's how much your resume counts. It's not going to get you the job, but you can't get into the process of exploring work opportunities without it. It's kind of a punching ticket process, if you will. Now, what ends up happening in that 10% is employers still typically get more applicants than they have than they can possibly process individually. I think I gave you the example of Standard TV and Appliance posting an assistant manager's job and having over 900 applicants submit their resume and cover letters in a course of a 48-hour period. There isn't any employer around, even with large ones, that are going to take the time to comb through every applicant's resume and cover letter and sort that out. So what they do, and even small companies have access to this, is they will scan your application and your resume, and they'll put it through a process of tests in screening software that will reduce, in the Standard TV and Appliance example, over 900, it'll reduce it to 50 or 60 that meet certain criteria. Now, what the criteria is that they're looking for things, again, like grammar and spelling errors, things that don't match up. Maybe there's too many fonts. Maybe it's colored paper and photographs that the software can't translate, and those all get kicked out. You could be a perfect candidate, but if your resume isn't constructed correctly in a way that this software can read it, it will get kicked out. Now, notice at the top in red, I say this is a rejection process, not a selection process. So what that means is the employer is trying to whittle down the applicant pool to a number where they can actually start to talk individually with those applicants. So they're using tools in the beginning that are inexpensive, don't take up time. This is why when you apply to a company, it takes a long time to get in front of someone, if you ever do, because that time, individual one-on-one time, is expensive from the employer standpoint. So they want to use that time efficiently. So that's the first step. Second step is background, motor vehicles, credit reports, social media checks, criminal background checks, all of that. And that counts 15%. And that weeds out another group of people. Now, the reason they can do your credit report and other things is when you went in online on the company's website to apply for a particular job posted on the company's website, they asked you to fill out the application on their website. One of the last questions they have for you is 1 or 2 boxes to check, where you're actually, if you read it carefully, you're giving them permission to do all this background. So it's not like they can just arbitrarily take your information and go do that. And unless you check those boxes, they won't process your application. Doing background is a must. So if you pass these first 2 steps, the 10 and 15%, now you've got the third step, which is screening. Now, this is where they'll use telephone interviews, they'll use group interviews, individual, sometimes team interviews, multiple interviews, again, to screen down the pool of candidates. Now, if you're into this third step, which weighs 25% of the decision, you're probably one of maybe as many as 5, maybe 10 final candidates. So you're kind of getting close to becoming one of the 2 or 3 people that they're actually going to make a decision on. Some of you may have experienced this. If you haven't, you may. A company will take your application, your resume, cover letter, they'll run you through their screening software. You'll get a phone call to come to their location for an interview. Sometimes they'll tell you it's a group interview. And how this works is that they will take, again, if there's 30 or 40 or 50 candidates, they'll bring the candidate pool in this third step in groups of 10 into a conference room. So you're going to sit at a U-shaped conference table with 9 other candidates, and at the head of the table is probably the hiring manager and someone from human resources. They're going to spend an hour asking questions in a discussion with you and the 9 other applicants who've passed this stage. And once that step is complete, they'll eliminate largely 7 or 8 of the people that are at the table to whittle this pool down further. So the last step, which is weighs 50%. Now you notice that this is important. This weighs a lot. This counts as much as all of the other 3 screens you've gone through up to this point. These are work samples, getting it. These are one-on-one interviews. They're delving into your experience. Have you done internships, cooperative education? Those are all experiential. They're observable, doable, measurable things you've done in or around the nature of the work you're applying for. And if you do an internship or you do have cooperative experience, if you're an accounting major and you've done an accounting internship and you're a member of the Oregon Society of Certified Public Accountants, that starts to make a big difference in your favor with the other potential candidates. Now, if you get to this 4th and final step where it weighs 50%, you're probably one of 2 or 3 candidates that they're going to choose from. So you're right there in that right moment. Now, this takes a lot of time to get to that place on the left-hand side of the pie here. This could take 4, 6, 7, 8 weeks to get you into the final categories. Primarily, the hiring managers and the companies that are following this process are trying to avoid making hiring mistakes. And it's expensive. If they hire the wrong person and they eventually don't get the performance that they need, or they eventually have to hire that or fire that person, that's very, very expensive. The second issue they have is that they're exposed to many more liabilities in the work environment with Title IX, Title III, discrimination laws, both federally and state. So they're going through checklists and repeat checking, and they're doing the due diligence to avoid crossing over any of these red lines. So it slowed the process down. There was a time 25, 30 years ago that you would submit your resume and your references, maybe a cover letter, and the process would last 2 weeks and you'd be offered a job. Not so anymore. Not so today. Okay, questions about this?
Yes, on the second group, MAVR standards is for what? Maybe I missed it while you are talking, probably.
So say it again. Say your question again, please.
MAVR on the second one after the background check and the MAVR and credit and
Yep.
then social and other. Yeah, I need MAVR.
So yeah, so what ends up happening, you're in these first 2 steps, 10 and 15%, you're not having any discussions or contact with the company. You went in, you uploaded your resume, your cover letter, you completed their questionnaire online, you checked a couple boxes to give them permission to do the second step here, which is background, but no one's talked to you yet. And only after you pass these first 2 steps, these rejection steps, your resume and your background, motor vehicles, credit reports, social media, and others, then you start to have the company contacting you. Does that help, Laura?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so now stepping back from this slide, what does this mean to all of you? It means that first of all, this is serious business. It's not as fluid. I mean, if you're going to be a barista at a coffee shop and you don't like it and you quit, you can be a barista somewhere else. If you're going to work in the cannabis industry, there's some fluidity, but most of that fluidity is at the entry-level point. Many companies of consequence, meaning size and longevity, been around a while, are looking at you with 2 lenses. One is they're looking at you as a net add to their performance of their company. In other words, it's a good fit, good match. You're going to help the company. The second one is, are you raw material for future leadership in that company, management, and what have you? So you have to take this seriously. You can't skip steps. You can't kind of throw things out there and expect people to find you. They're not going to find you. Again, the first 2 steps for sure, maybe the third one, they're trying to eliminate people. They're trying to find mistakes, errors, reasons why they don't have to keep you in the process. And the people that fall out of that process are the ones that they invest the time on the left-hand side, really exploring. So this is why you want to look at this course on having a career plan. And a career plan can be an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. It can be 54 pages of really thoughtful planning that are included in the course here in those PDFs each week, or anything in between. But you really have to have some kind of a plan or process. And the organizations that you come into, obviously you come in at an entry level rank and file, and you're given job descriptions, hourly wage sometimes, and you're expected to perform. And if in effect, what you're doing in this first level is you're developing a reputation for yourself for character, maybe making promises and keeping them. Things need to get done. You're anticipating work and helping your boss avoid mistakes, and really, as opposed to coming in and doing what is expected or minimally expected. And you can do that too. But the people that are going to be looked at as what are called high potentials are going to move from that entry level into middle management. And I will tell you that almost any company that has an HR department has what's called a high pot list, HIGHPOT. High pot is high potential, which means that the HR group, in terms of talking with the top management and sometimes the managers, are collecting information on events and circumstances where entry-level people have gone above and beyond their job descriptions to help the company. They've exhibited new skills. They've developed. They've taken advantage of ongoing education. So the reason that list exists is because someone in middle management or top management at one point is going to call human resources because they have a vacancy, and they're going to ask HR for that list. And they're going to look carefully at who's on the list as the candidates they're going to want to promote. So again, the way to look at this, you could look at this in knowing yourself personally, but frankly, you carry your character traits and personality traits into the work environment. So what are character traits? You're asking people to judge you by your actions, not by your intentions. You're asking people to understand when you make a promise, you keep it, and therefore sometimes you don't agree to do things because you don't want to be held to that commitment. Your goal in the sense of character traits is to be respected, not to be liked. And what ends up happening with the character traits is that it results in leadership opportunities, because you become reliable, predictable in terms of taking the company in a particular direction. You can be trusted, basically. You're trustworthy on the character trait side. If you operate on the right-hand side, which is a lot of where we learn how to operate as we grow up in school, grade school, this is the old story about being in 6th or 7th grade, and you're sitting at lunch across from a friend, and you trade your friend a peanut butter sandwich for their tuna fish sandwich. And a lot of the activities we learn in socializing as we go through school is driven by personality traits. Are you in the right group? Are you liked by the right people? So in that case, if you're basically, as you become an adult, you're understanding your personality, but you're also trying to develop and strengthen your character traits. Personality traits, what you're asking people to do is to judge you by your intentions, not by your actions. So I intended to call you, I didn't, but I'm still a good person. You're wanting people to judge you by the promises you make, not the promises you keep. Your primary goal is to be liked. And this results in manipulations. I'm sure a lot of you can think of managers you've had in the past that operated on the right-hand side of the page. They were somewhat unpredictable. They would tell you they would do something, they didn't follow through on it, or they would tell you something that wasn't quite the complete story, or you could see them, observe them manipulating people to get work done. The manager that operates on personality traits believes that if he can get the people that report to him or her to like them, they will do the work that needs to be done. And what ends up happening is that the opposite happens. Morale suffers, trustworthiness suffers, and the environment tends to slow down. And this is that question I've asked before, is that you've worked with people who you respected but didn't like. That was a work environment that had a different kind of sensibility to it, as opposed to managers who worked hard at being liked, but you didn't respect them because they would make promises and not keep them. So this is a good slide to kind of think about when you're thinking about yourself and your interests and what you want to do, how you're going to do it, and separating personality traits from character traits. Professional sales is, a lot of the work opportunities involve some level of sales or marketing. And in this case, our initial impressions of sales sometimes is somewhat limited, narrow, but really professional salespeople, people that are extremely successful, are problem solvers. They're advocates for people who they're talking with. They're knowledgeable about their products and their industry, and they're very professional. They're ethical in that sense. And here's a last slide that kind of shows you how sales and marketing, you can apply this to anything else, operations, human resources, but there's a ladder effect that you can see kind of evolving from left to right, where an entry level might be a sales rep, an independent contractor, entrepreneur. And as you gain experience and become more successful, you take on new opportunities, sales managers, territory managers, and ultimately chief marketing officers, sales executives, etc. So there's a career path for sales and marketing, basically, is what I'm saying. Any questions about these slides? Okay. All right, so let's jump into today's chapter. Picture yourself in the workplace. So, visualization is important, but this chapter is really much more than just visualizing yourself in a workplace. Visualization, imagery can frame and help you focus on a future point in time where you're trying to get to. It may not end up being that particular image or visionary element, but it gives you direction. So if you want to own your own company, if you want to be an executive in an organization, if you want to see yourself highly regarded and revered in a particular industry, there are roles and responsibilities you can see over time that you can think about holding those positions or being in those positions, and be thinking about how you plan and organize your efforts to move toward those. So let's continue the search for a good career and job match. Now, I underline match and put it in red for a reason. We want to have the mental framework here. We want to change the mental framework that you look at work as where the employer controls the process and you're actually begging, pleading, hoping to be chosen, kind of like a pickup basketball game or baseball game in your neighborhood. You're kind of trying to appear to be attractive enough where you get chosen. My point is you need to move away from that and move toward a kind of a mutual process or match. Now, matching, there's different institutions that look at matching. You can look at some of these dating sites as a way to match. Now, it's similar in the sense these dating sites are similar to the process of looking for work, and in that the people that are in these applications, like matching application, relationship applications, are presenting you their very best side. They're not telling you all the complete picture. You're only getting one fairly narrow view in either photographs, background, what have you. And the employer is doing the same thing. We've talked about this. The employer's not going to give you a complete picture of who they are. They're not going to talk about how bad morale is. They're not going to tell you how they've gone through 3 layoffs in the last 12 months. They're not going to tell you about the discrimination lawsuit that has been filed, or the product liabilities lawsuits that have been involved. There are OSHA's come in and find them. They're not going. You're going to have to dig and look for that. So your job is to identify broadly an industry you want to find yourself in. What's the function you want to follow in that industry? What do you want to be doing? And then narrow down the companies based on size, geography, culture, general reputation. So you've got a pool, like the employer has a pool of candidates you're in as a potential employee. You're creating a pool of potential employers. And guess what? You get to choose who gets to hire you. That's your choice. So where we're going with this is to kind of pull some of the ownership and control of the process back. So fundamentally, you're actually talking to employers who want to hire you, and you're choosing which one to hire you, to allow to work for. So the match, assessing what you want from an employer. Now, in a relationship matching process, you could have a long list of requirements, and the longer the list is, the fewer people walk in the face of the earth that represent that. Well, you can do the same thing with an employer. You can make an awfully long list of things you expect of your employer, but as you make that list longer and longer, the pool of potential employers gets fairly narrow. It doesn't make it impossible, but it makes it a lot harder for you to land a job with that company. There's a story, a fellow that I know that's an executive at Nike. He was laid off in an unrelated industry, and always had wanted to work with Nike in Beaverton. And he worked very hard. I think he applied for, over the course of 3 years, 2 3 years, maybe 15 different positions in Nike. Where he finally broke through and got hired is that he spent time building a network of people who already work at Nike. He did this by going to the Chamber of Commerce and seeking out Nike employees. He participated in community programs where Nike employees were participating, got to meet and know the people and understand the culture, what Nike was doing, what they were attempting to do, how the employees felt about their work environment. And that started to match up with the interests that this friend of mine had, where eventually he got hired. A lot of work, but the reward was worth the effort. The second one, exploring what different employers have to offer employees. Some employers emphasize different things. Some employers emphasize the product quality to the community. Some employers focus on their employees. Some of them focus on their employees' welfare, like health. They have health programs, or they focus on their employees' education. So they're introducing challenging education at work, and there are others. So, again, you want to recognize the differences in workplace cultures. Cultures, this is probably where it's hardest or more challenging to determine a company's culture, but you can do this. Some of this can be found online. There's a website called Glassdoor, where employees who've worked with organizations you're attempting to interview with, and they'll talk about their work experience. Now you have to kind of balance that with how many people are sharing those that information, what that might be, in terms of having a good perspective on it. But that's one way to do it. Having coffee, introducing yourself to an employee and asking to have a cup of coffee, and ask the person who, how do you like working there? What's challenging? What's not challenging? Is the general reputation true to what the publications are saying? So you kind of do some investigation. Explore career fields and workplace possibilities. What are, if you're an accounting major, you don't have to become a CPA. You don't have to do taxes or necessarily do tax returns. You can be an accounting degree major, and you can run operations for a business. You can do marketing for a business. You can grow and use your accounting experience to leverage that into gaining more skills and insights and knowledge by stretching yourself a little bit. So, and that's the same with marketing. You can be a marketing major with a marketing degree, and you can find yourself in the accounting workplace. Now, the accounting, you wouldn't necessarily be doing tax code work, but you might be interpreting spreadsheets, doing marketing indexes off of the balance statement, income statement to help guide marketing. So there's a lot of possibilities here. Workplace culture. So let's look at this a little bit. Recognize the differences among employers. So what you might do, and there's some PDFs that will help you with this in Blackboard, is to identify what's important to you in a company's workplace culture. Is it mutual respect? Is it an emphasis on growth, guiding you, education? Is it on health? Is it where's the culture kind of anchored? One of the ways to kind of open up some of that insight is to look at the leadership of the company. Who are they? How long have they been in that role? What's their background? What did they get involved with? Because the company largely is a reflection of the leadership of that company. Lifestyle differences. Some companies are outdoor oriented, some are indoor oriented, some are family oriented. Job preferences. What do you prefer? Do you prefer to work in a cubicle on site? Do you prefer to work remotely? Some kind of balance. Does the culture match your culture? This includes political orientations, religious or theological orientations. There's a packaging company over on Sandy Boulevard, very successful one, and it's owned by a family that are Christian believers, and they have Bibles in their conference room. Some people might feel that that's comforting. Some might be offended by it. So you have to understand, what's your reaction going to be when you find yourself in a work environment where the culture doesn't line up with your culture. What's the employee relationship? Do the companies try to develop their employees, or do they punish their employees, or their favorites? Or is the company driven off of personality traits largely and not character traits? What's the workplace behavior and conduct? Do people get away with harassment? Is it looked the other way? These are important questions. You don't want to take a job with an expectation that this is going to be wonderful, and then the reality kind of creeps in. You want to understand what that is ahead of time. The way to think of this is that you saw the pie chart that I used where the companies scrutinize everything, your background, motor vehicles, criminal history. You should be looking at the companies in the very same way. You should be investigating the companies. And I'm not talking about every company and industry, but the ones you narrow down that you want to, work with, and really try to understand, what's making that company work. You should be having evaluations. You should be looking at industry rankings. How does a company rank in their industry based on different criteria? You can find all kinds of research out there on companies and their position in the marketplace. And you should be including that in your screening for potential companies that would have the benefit of hiring you. The least of which is to be able to talk intelligently when you're being interviewed. You can talk about the company's history and where they rank and how they got there. And you'll understand, you have much better questions and better insights. So cultures continue, lifestyle differences. What are you looking for? Advancement or status quo? Does the company tend to promote from within, or do they tend to go outside? Is there travel? Is it travel regionally, statewide, nationally? Is it 8 to 5, or is it overtime? Is it part-time? Health insurance, what's the quality? What's the level of insurance? What's the future training and development the company provides you in getting you to become more valuable to them? On the job preferences, beyond pay and a nice manager, what do you need to perform well? Do you need to work independently? Is it more oriented around, leave me alone, I'll get it done? Or do you need a group of people to work with? You're more team oriented. Are there strict procedures, or are there flexibilities? Big projects or quick results? So like procedures and flexibility. If you're going to go into businesses and industries that are science related, maybe fire, police. There aren't a lot of flexibilities. There are strict processes you have to follow. That are expected to follow. You're not permitted to kind of create your own approach to issues like fighting fires or providing security and protection in a community, for example. So those are all things to consider. Let me stop here and just see if there's any questions so far. No? Okay. Let's keep going. Workplace cultures, match your culture of company to your cultural preferences. So, for example, I think this is correct. 96 or 7% of all the companies that exist today have 500 or fewer employees. That's the federal definition for a small business is 500 or fewer employees. So it's highly likely in your career, depending on the industry certainly, but highly likely you'll be working for what would be defined as a small employer. Now, 500 employees is still big, relatively speaking, but many of those companies have 100 or fewer companies, and companies that have 100 or fewer employees tend to have a more of a culture based on relationships and knowing people, because the head count's small enough where you can recognize and develop relationships at work. As a industry gets bigger, it becomes less personal. So company size might be that something you want to consider. Where's the headquarters located? Is there a commitment to diversity? Is there a commitment, if you feel strongly about the environment? Are there steps in place for recycling, reusing? Is there a commitment in the community to that? What's the mission, values, and purpose of the company? I want to read that carefully, because the mission, values, and purpose is what the company is trying to tell you who they are. It's not like this, unlike these match apps online where you're trying to find a relationship. The mission, values, and purpose a company puts out there is they're trying to convince you that's who they are. And one of the things you want to try to sort through is who they represent themselves. Is that actually how they're seen in the marketplace? On your side, you might want to be a big fish in a small pond or a little fish in a big pond. Depends on, how visible you want to be in an organization. Do you get exposure to other regions or international elements? So you stretch and grow. What's the impact of a diverse workforce, working with people that speak different languages, have different cultures, different ethnicities, different religions? Frankly, in the long run, what's your life purpose or mission statement? What's your personal life purpose? I mean, looking back on a 40 or 50-year work history, where do you want to find yourself? What are the results you're attempting to accomplish in a career trajectory? Company-employee relationship, the common company needs versus employee needs. So on the left-hand side, the company wants to operate their business, produce high-quality products or services, meet the needs of customers, and help make a profit. An employee wants to be paid for their work, safe, healthy work environment, provided tools and equipment to do their job, and an immediate manager, supervisor is good to me. Good to me would be somebody that I can trust, who's reliable, who makes and keeps promises, and is really focused on being respected for their role. Behavior and conduct in the workplace works in both directions. Is there some common courtesy process? Is there a focus on productivity or a lack of productivity? Is there a focus on health, safety, and security? Are there ethical expectations? Now, some of this you can tease out. If you're in the midst of a process of exploring a company, ask to have a copy of the company policy manual. Every company has one. So at some point, ask the person who's running the process if you can have a company policy manual. And in that manual, you'll see a lot of things addressing these four areas. The how employees are expected to treat each other, what's the focus on productivity? Does the company provide health and safety and security in the work environment? Security can include everything from ear protection, eye protection, to violence, to abuse of drugs. I mean, if you have a company of 100 or more employees, there are going to be a lot of social issues going on there, disabilities, deaths, drug abuse, alcoholism. You're going to have some of those issues just because of the cross-section. And it's certainly, what's the ethical expectations of the company? If they provide you a laptop, what are the rules they expect you to follow in using that company's property? If you're on site and you're using a company's Wi-Fi, what are the expectations the company places on you from an ethical standpoint on using that Wi-Fi? Exploring career fields, work possibilities, in-demand industries and occupations. So what are the? I mean, you can Google this. You can do a search on, 10 most promising occupations that have a great 5-year outlook, occupations in accounting that have a great 5-year outlook, occupations that pay the most money. Where are the income opportunities? You can do a lot of that, narrow it down. You can look for in-demand careers, certainly. A lot of this you can find on sites like LinkedIn. LinkedIn produces some of these analysis. Indeed.com has a lot of this research. You can find this pretty readily, and it can help you narrow down your search process. In-demand occupations, growing number of jobs, more jobs and qualified people. In-demand predictions. Some of these are medical fields, services meaning they don't produce a product. So this could be accounting, could be law, could be consulting, things like that, career coaching, computer and technology work. Certainly that's growing. Mount Hood just got funding and approval from the state of Oregon. It's the only community college that's going to offer a 4-year degree in cybersecurity. It's the first one, it may be the first one in the country, but certainly first one in Oregon. That starts in the fall. And marketing sales is always robust. Now, when you start looking at industries and occupation, you have to understand that the trajectory of a particular career isn't a straight line. It's typically got peaks and valleys. So the question you might want to ask yourself is the best time to come into an industry or a career opportunity at the top of the curve, at the bottom of the curve? And I would argue that it's at the bottom of the curve, because you're coming into the industry at the bottom. All of the effort and forces are going to go up. That it's going to be tipping up the curve. If you come in at the top of the curve, it's likely that the industry is going to compress. It's going to consolidate, and it's going to go through a process of resetting before it starts to grow again. So be thinking about that. Online resources, there's some. Career One Stop is one. The BLS Occupational Outlook Handbook, which is an HR kind of book that most HR people have. I don't know if our library has this, but I wouldn't hesitate to ask about it. Local state industry websites, chambers of commerce typically have this. If you're going to join an association, one of the best values you find in joining a professional association is they do their own research, and they will tell you what the concerns of the industry are, and they'll spell it out. Look at job postings, articles about recruiting. Certainly consult Mount Hood Community College's Career Services Office. They have resources there that are plentiful. Oddly enough, for some reason, students either aren't aware of it or don't take advantage of it. Most of it's free. Great counseling. Hidden careers. So the point of this slide, we're going to get into this in chapter 6, is creating a networking in your industry. And it's been studied time and again. Half the jobs that are available today that you would see on Indeed or LinkedIn or any other site, half of those, that represents only half the available openings today. There's another 50% of the job openings that exist today that you will never see, that are not posted, aren't shown on these websites. There are reasons for that. It isn't, typically these are better jobs, higher paying jobs, but they're typically filled by executives and companies who network with each other in the industry to find candidates. They don't post it unless they're legally required to. They don't typically post these jobs. They fill them. And I can honestly tell you, I've done that probably half a dozen times in my career when I was an executive at Prudential Financial for Global. There were critical job positions that would be open where I needed to have a lot of trust in that person. I had to know who they are. And rather than go through that pie chart we went through in that first slide, I would call people who knew me and I would talk to them about people that they'd interviewed that they would have hired but couldn't because they didn't have a position. And I would collectively pull together a small pool of candidates, and then I would have HR do some of those background checks on that small group. But I wanted to be involved, particularly with positions that I had to trust, that I had a lot of a lot of involvement in the process. And so we'll look at career networks, why you do it, how you do it, and it's not collecting business cards. It's not trying to be friends with a lot of people. It's really pretty simple, but it can be very, very powerful. Some of you may have experienced this. I know at least on 2 or 3 occasions, I've had job opportunities where I wasn't looking. I got a phone call because someone had talked to someone who knew me really well and recommended me to be approached about a job opening. Common and possible job environments. So this is a kind of an example. You got nursing, construction, historian on the left-hand side. Most common job environments are hospitals, medical offices, clinics, and constructions, residential, commercial construction, remodeling. Historian or school teachers or museums. You know, you could be a college faculty member. Now, I would tell you if you're aspiring to be a college faculty member and teaching at a college level, you're going to need at least your master's degree in business, if not in a specific area. So if you take nursing out to the right, clinics at schools, industrial settings, healthcare research, medical insurance. So if you're a nursing major, you want to get into nursing, what this is saying, kind of culminating these slides, is what's the work environment you see yourself working in? Are you working in a business? Are you working in a healthcare? Are you doing research? Are you doing in a urgent care? What is it? Construction? Set buildings for movies and theaters, specialty shipping container, construction, building maintenance, supervisor, industry in-house, construction teams, consulting's another one. Historian would be librarian, corporate archivist, researcher, media fact checker, publications reviewer, and writer. I know someone who was obsessed with Coca-Cola paraphernalia. They had a huge collection of Coca-Cola promotions, posters, cans, bottles, vending machines. I mean, historically. And this person ended up getting a job at Coca-Cola being their archivist because he was so familiar with the history of Coca-Cola and collecting and certifying a lot of these things. And that's what this person ended up doing. Be careful with sensitive information. This is pretty straightforward and obvious. Don't share passwords. Follow all company security rules. Care for equipment as if you owned it. It's pretty straightforward. Expanding your perspective. The world of work is continually changing. It's evolving constantly. It's based on economics, politics, society. I mean, there's elements that are coming together in the workplace. ESG. Critical race theory, other elements, diversity efforts in an environment, global warming. You can pick almost anything, and there are elements that are finding their way into the businesses. Expanded perspective yields on more opportunities. In other words, you stretch yourself out. You know, if you're an accounting major, you don't typically think of yourself as doing bookkeeping, payroll, or accounts payable, accounts receivable. There are other areas of work that indirectly will need your experience and abilities in accounting, but they're not in an accounting function. So you want to expand your perspective continually, focus on what you can do, not what you can't do. Question your understanding of your field and what you learned in the past. Check your assumptions against latest facts and data. In other words, don't let yourself kind of fall into a perspective, a limited perspective of what you can and can't do. Test it, stretch yourself, try new things. Social profiles, we've talked about this a little bit. You can search companies online, companies, recruiters search applicants online. So if you haven't, you can do it, what's called a vanity search. You Google yourself and just see what comes up. You want to clean up Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, remove references to any inappropriate or behavior that would be misunderstood. You want to demonstrate your ethical values. So again, social media tends to amplify the distinction between character traits and personality traits. And much of what goes on Facebook is personality driven. I'd argue a little bit that LinkedIn is hopefully more character driven in the sense of, your beliefs, your activities, what you've accomplished and achieved and performed, where Facebook tends to be much more distorted in that sense. And so companies will look at your profiles, your history, and see where you've been, what you're doing, what you're representing to the public, and they'll include that in their decision-making, whether to continue to interview you. Teamwork, what teamwork looks like, collaboration, communication, sharing strengths, resources, better decisions, solutions, quality. And I'm certain all of you've done group work in some of your classes and absolutely hated it. You get a group of 5, you get an assignment, and over the course of time, 3 people disappear, 2 of you actually get the work done, but all 5 get credit for it. And the unfortunate thing is that you're going to find that in the workforce too. The one thing, the tool I would give you to help ensure that people do participate is to create what I would call a work contract or a project contract where everybody has to sign off on. And before you start the work, you agree on expectations, who's going to do what the deliverable will be, when, so that as people, it's harder for people to fall out of that process when they've got a clear role and expectation placed on them. And it's much like a contract in the sense that it commits people to, it takes the personality types who make promises but don't keep them, and it forces them to ensure that they deliver on what they say they will. And there's more to it than that I won't go into here, but teamwork is something you're going to see more of, or at least it's an element of almost every business, is that there's going to be project opportunities. Now, the thing you need to think about with project opportunities, you can roll your eyes and take a deep breath, but the way to think about a project opportunity is that the company's sometimes will use this process of project teams to sift and winnow out people that they want to promote. And I've seen this used. I've used it. It's not abused, but it's a process of sorting out who's committed, who can get work done, who can focus, who's a person of character, not personality. And as you observe and watch the work done by the project team, you can understand the strengths and weaknesses of each of the members better and understand what the long-term opportunity might be in the company, looking at them in a better role or a new role. Okay, these are just some random quotes. Picture yourself on the job every day. Most jobs are 1 part wonderful, 2 parts drudgery. That's why they call it work. Yeah, a little bit. You're going to have, I mean, we all do, good days and bad days. When you can envision a real day-to-day workplace and see yourself smiling in that future, then you have a goal. That is the job you want to find. So in some respects, that second bullet isn't a job you find, it's a job you actually create, because you come into the workplace with a framework and of a mindset that it's going to be productive and it's going to be valuable. Third one, as human beings, we seek varying levels of status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness. Seek a job that can provide these at a level you can find satisfying. And the third bullet's interesting because human nature kind of operates this way. There are moments in a work environment where things are disorganized and not focused, and you want structure and you want authority and you want direction, and you work toward getting that, and you find you have a manager who has the authority, holds you accountable, and gives you direction. And when you get that, you realize you aren't as independent as you once were or wanted to be. You don't have the creativity and freedoms you once had, and now you want the pendulum to swing back the other way. You want less direction, less structure. So the point I'm trying to make is that in a work environment, there's a pendulum for you that swings between having clarity, structure, and authority, and independence and creativity. And it tends to swing back and forth largely by who you report to. So in that sense, you want to be aware of where you're most productive, where you work best, and where that pendulum should be. Okay, let's stop for questions. Who's got a question? No? All right. So I've got some announcements. I want to reinforce the announcement I made at the beginning of class, and I'm going to look at the second quiz because I was alerted to, I might have been Luis, that some of the questions aren't getting structured in a way that you can answer them correctly. So I'm going to look at that. Second thing, next week, we typically start at 9 in the morning. Next week, we're going to start at 10:30, and I'll send an announcement out to reinforce this, but we will not start at 9. We'll start at 10:30, and we'll probably go for about an hour. And, next week, we're going to really talk in deep depth about a resume. So if you want me to look at your resume, Luis has sent me his. It's the only one I think I've gotten so far, but if you want me to look at it, I'd be happy to do that. Send that to me in the next 4 or 5 days. But next week, we'll look at chapters 4 and 5, planning and writing your resume. Again, I would emphasize, if you don't have a resume, stop by the Mount Hood Career Services office and they'll help you build one from scratch. They're really very good. They've got templates in there to help you with that. And I encourage you to go in and introduce yourself and, just tell them, hey, look, I'm a student. I'm getting near graduation and I just don't know where to start. I need some help, and someone will help you. Okay. So next week, 10:30, last call for questions. Has this been helpful?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah,
good.
thank you.
All right. Well, again, we'll close this down, but if you think of something after we close this meeting out, send me an email, or during the week if you've got a questions. Feel free to, ask me if you're concerned about something. Just bring it to my attention. We'll work through it. If I don't have that opportunity to talk with you, I'll see you again at 10:30 next Friday, and I'll send an announcement out to remind everybody. So with that, I hope everybody has a great, safe weekend, and I'll see you in a week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Sia.
Bye.